Hello, my name is Tyler Zylstra. I will be talking about the elimination of ovarial lethal white syndrome in horses, mainly pertaining to American paint horses. There are a few myths out there about ovarial lethal white syndrome. The first is that all ovarial horses are carriers of the lethal allele. This is not true. Many ovarials out there have both normal alleles and cannot pass on the trait. Another myth I found is that only one parent determines if a foal will be lethal white. As we know from genetics, this is false. Both parents must contribute a lethal allele. Another one is that you can reliably tell carrier status of a paint by their color patterns. To a degree, there is some correlation, but you can never definitively tell a carrier simply by looking at it. You will need to do a genetic test. Another myth was that 25% of foals from two ovarial parents will be lethal white. And again, this is false as well, as not all ovaros are carriers of the disease. Another myth I found was that registered Tobianos and paints cannot carry the lethal allele. However, there are a few bloodlines out there that are in fact carriers, so just because it's registered does not mean that it is a normal horse. Again, totally white paints cannot be carriers of the lethal allele. This is false. There are many totally white paints out there that are in fact carriers, and it is actually totally white paints are more commonly carriers than other coat types for paints. And then another one is that all totally white foals born to two ovarial parents are lethal whites. This is also false, as we know that there are totally white paints out there. So those have to come somewhere and they can't have those if they were all dying. And another one is that mares cannot produce lethal foals in consecutive years. As we know from genetics, this is false. Just because one foal was lethal, the odds of the next one being lethal or normal are exactly the same, and that first one has absolutely no effect. They're completely independent events. A little background on ovarial lethal white syndrome is that it is generally described as a recessive genetic disorder. If getting down very complicatedly speaking, it can be dominant to a degree, but is mostly recessive. And again, that has to deal more with mutations and extremely advanced genetics. What happens when you have a lethal foal is you get two lethal alleles, and then it will result in an incomplete digestive tract, which means that once the foal is born, it's unable to take up any nutrients and will essentially starve to death because of that. And then normally the foal will die within 72 hours. Normally is shorter than that. 72 is the higher end. Normally it's about 36 hours. There is no surgical treatment or any sort of vaccine or anything. This is simply a genetic disorder that results in the foal not developing correctly. So there's no way to correct it once the foal has been born or before. Again, owls, it can occur in American quarter horses, thoroughbreds, standardbreds, Appaloosas, Morgans, miniature horses, Tennessee walking horses. It is most predominant in the American paint horse. And that being said, it occurs mainly in horses with the ovarial frame pattern, as evident by the name ovarial lethal white syndrome. It obviously came from ovarial animals. However, it can be present in horses with white markings. You will rarely see any solid colored bay, chestnut, black, any solid colored horse out there other than white that will be a carrier for this disease. Here's an example of a couple of those ovarial frame patterns. The horse on the left is pretty standard ovaro. The top right is simply a paint that has obviously a lot of white on it, which is an indicator, but isn't by any means proof that it'll be a carrier for the disease. And then the chart on the bottom right simply has degrees of the white markings that will commonly occur in paint horses. So moving on to testing for the disease, there are numerous companies out there that offer a test. They can range from $25 to $50, and I'm sure that there are some out there that cost more than that. The Animal Genetics Incorporated I found to be the most convenient test in my research. This test only requires hairs to be sent in and is only $25, so it's cheap and very easy. There's no fancy shipping of blood. You don't have to worry about collection of blood or anything like that. So you just go pluck a few hairs, put them in a baggie, fill out their form, and ship it to them. And then as far as the economics go, which besides the unnecessary death of foals is the most important aspect of this, if we simply look at your average mare out there, semen is going to cost anywhere from $250 on up if you have to buy it. Obviously, if you have your own, that's a negligible cost. But so $250 there. If you look at your mare care, can range from almost nothing to thousands of dollars if you have any problems, if you have to call the vet, if the foal has to be pulled, anything like that. Can be just a very wide range of prices. And then the selling price of that foal is just as variable. It can sell from a few $100s to tens of thousands depending on its pedigree. And when you look at that, if you look at the semen cost and the mare care cost, which will be, simply say for easy math, $500, you're going to sell the foal for $1,000. What happens when that foal is born is not only do you lose that what would have been a profit of $500, but you now have a debt of $500 because you had those initial costs that you aren't getting back, which can result in massive potential loss if you're talking, you start spending, $1,000 to $5,000 for semen, and then you're going to sell that horse, and it's born and it dies, all because of something that could have been avoided through a simple $25 test. So that is the main reason why we're looking at elimination of this disease, especially with the simplicity of the test, how easy it is to do and relatively inexpensive. This disease could theoretically be eliminated in one generation by removing all carriers from the breeding population. And again, not all Overos are in fact carriers. There would still be all of the unique coat patterns out there that people like to see. So, we're excited.